and disability, sometimes disability is hidden and you don't self-identify. How can we elevate this conversation of representation and disability? So it's been really wonderful to see the company really come together and approach it differently this time.
Okay, I'll go. I'm like looking at faces. So some of the basics I think that have to do with hiring are really taking a look at your data, seeing where your candidates are coming from, if you're making it easier or harder for people from marginalized communities to pass through your process. But also, when you look at the people portion, it's taking a look within, not just with hiring, but how you're developing and growing folks, right? So if you look at leadership and it all looks the same, which I'm sure some of you are at companies where that's the case, it's making sure that you're looking at the workforce in different ways. So it's hiring processes, but it's also looking at your performance processes, talent reviews, looking at succession plannings, who's really next in line and why. You know, oftentimes people that are part of succession planning plans are people that are top of mind for the leader. And often that's, you know, someone that might be like them or the person that's always their go-to, and they're not often looking far enough down in the organization to see, well, do I have people that are actually underrepresented here that I need to help bring up in the organization? So it's looking at those processes differently as well, along with how you bring people into the organization through hiring.
Yeah, and for Alaska, especially with the COVID messaging around anti-Asian discrimination and the impact of COVID on Black, Latinx, and Native communities, we've actually been learning how to do this. How do we share this message out? As a disparate workforce, and we're essential workers. So we are as far flung as being from, you know, the northern reaches of the Arctic to Hawaii to the East Coast to, you know, to Puerto Rico. And this is whole spread of groups of people need to get messaging and also need to have support. One thing that we've learned is that we definitely need to reach out to each different workforce. So whether it's pilots, mechanics, whether it's customer service agents or a corporate team, and have specific messaging for them, but also for our management. And I'm not talking about the highest level management, but the mid-level management who might be the leader in their own region. And then of course, then you have your upper level management and the highest level of management. And all of that requires tailored messaging. And frankly, we're still in the process of learning how to best do it. And also making sure that, you know, for the folks that fly with us, that they're aware that we are trying to do these things and trying to be better. So I would say for us at Alaska, it's still a work in progress for this particular topic, which has been top of mind for me.
Awesome. I have a few more questions for the panelists, but if anybody has questions for any of us, please put them in the chat and we will address those in a little bit. So, so let's talk a little bit more about leadership and power structures and how we work to change the ratio at the top of the organizations, because what often happens is we have more diversity in the earlier roles, and there are a lot of, or earlier career roles, and there are a lot of reasons for that. You know, if we have not been addressing diversity and inclusion for years and years and years, obviously it's going to be more difficult to have leaders who are from underrepresented backgrounds, because we haven't hired them along the way. We haven't supported them. So that's one big reason why they're not, you know, why that is an imbalance. But there are others as well, as you, lots of studies show that as you work your way to the top as an underrepresented person, you're less likely to be promoted and have pay equity and all of those things that that develop a diverse leadership structure. So what are some of the things that people can do, that companies can do to create change there? How can we change that dynamic, that power dynamic, and really build diverse leadership?
And I'll hop on because I think Alaska has a really interesting story to tell. Our corporate board of directors, the biggest bosses of the company, we actually have 50% of our independent board directors are women, and 50% are also people of color. That is extraordinary, actually, for a Fortune 500 company. We're the first one, Fortune 500 on the West Coast, to achieve that. What that means is that from the highest levels of our team, that there's an awareness and there's a care for that topic. What's been really interesting is when I've had the chance to talk to our female board directors and ask them, I say, I hear that, you know, it's really hard to be a female corporate director. Why is that? Why is it so hard to find these corporate directors? And they kind of look at me like, they're all around you. It's like, literally, you just have to have that network. And I think that's actually quite applicable in the situation of executives as well. It is so much of that the people who are going to be your sponsors and advocates and raise and float your name have to have diverse networks as well. So I think from an, you know, as long as the very top has that visibility, it's much easier to permeate down. But I will say, as an airline in an operations business, it is still very, very hard to find female executives in these types of operational roles. And that's something that we have to work on from, as I was saying, from like literally from being girls and kids to start thinking about those types of fields. And there's huge, huge career opportunities to become a COO one day, but you have to have built that experience.
Okay, I will jump in here. So I think it goes back to what I was mentioning before about intention, right? There has to be a real effort from the top. I think a lot of companies, in my experience, have great grassroots efforts, lots of amazing employees who do a lot of great things for the company, make it a better place to work, all of the things, right? But without that C-suite being very intentional about who they add to their leadership ranks, it's not going to happen, right? And Melinda, as you mentioned, if we've been hiring for years and growing the company, and especially when your company is huge, it's tough because those leaders at the top don't leave often. So it really starts with those core leaders making the effort, and it really is on the company to make those efforts. It is harder to find women. It is harder to find people of color. It is harder to find people in other marginalized communities, but it is on the company to do that, right? And to hire people with not just different visible diversity, but vastly different backgrounds, you know, to make the company actually better. One of the executives at Indeed says, yesterday's best is not good enough for tomorrow's Indeed. And it's the same when we think about people and leadership, right? If you have the same folks in place without those differences in background and differences in community and outlook, then how are you going to be a more innovative company in the future? And I think if that is not understood at the top and there aren't real efforts to, no pun intended, diversify the leadership ranks, then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, LaFawn makes an absolutely really good point. Is sometimes it does take you know, people internally vocalizing that they're not seeing the representation they want to see at the top. And for our company, you know, we have a very large pool of Googlers with disabilities who were very, very vocal about how they wanted accessibility, for example, to be a priority for the company. Considering that accessibility was a part of Google's original mission statement, which is to make the world's information universally accessible and useful. But in order to do that, they wanted to see more people with disabilities in a leadership role to help guide the company forward, not only just in product development, but in like people operations and how we hire and the experience that employees have. Making sure that we are aware of what we need to do better as a company and bringing the voices to the table. And honestly, truthfully, the way I ended up at Google was because people within Google and the disability community wanted to see more work in our marketing and our branding, how we reached people with disabilities. And so I'm very grateful to that advocacy internally to give me an opportunity. And then now that I'm here, it's a responsibility for me to also open those doors for our community and making sure that we have diverse representation at the table, that we are included in conversation, not just in disability, but how intersectional it is, because we do touch so many different areas of diversity that in those conversations as well. It's also important that once you are in those roles, and there are not many leaders with disabilities out there in the tech industry specifically, that we really value the opportunity when we get there, and we make sure that we give others the opportunity to have a seat at the table too.
Yeah, awesome. There is a question in the chat that's a good follow-up question to this, is do any of your companies have specific diversity goals for management, whether they're director, VP, or executive, or board?
And I can speak to this for Alaska. We do not, but the aspiration is that that our teams look like the communities where we fly, and so that's kind of the overarching goal. But we don't necessarily have a timeline or specific numbers. But I would say in my time at Alaska, we have been very consistent about the board of directors being about 50% either and both women or people of color.
Okay, I'll go. So at Indeed, we don't have public-facing goals. We are working on setting them internally. I've been at Indeed for less than a year, so I'm working on it there. But in previous companies, I absolutely have. My prior company was Twilio, and we actually set public-facing goals that were very aggressive, 5-year goals that were for the global workforce to be 50% women and 30% underrepresented populations in the US. I think in prior companies I've worked for, there have been goals per kind of function. So there may be goals for sales, there may be goals for tech, but typically not goals set at the top. I think it's really powerful when there are goals set at the top, but how they're actualized and operationalized is definitely through the leaders and through the organizations. So, and I think every company is different, but definitely for the larger companies, having something to anchor to, having an aspirational goal to anchor to, because you don't want to get into quotas, right? Because quotas get you in trouble, but you do want to have targets and you do want to have aspirations to go for. And I think the loftier those are, the more aspirational those are, the better. And understanding that short-term goals aren't great for diversity. Anytime there's a massive change in the workforce in a short period of time, oftentimes what you see is attrition goes up not too long afterwards. So kind of long-term goals, really aspirational, and making it so that people actually have to change at the systems and the process level in order to get it done.
We do have goals internally to do everything we can to show that we are being more inclusive, not only in our workforce, but our work, to make sure that we are doing everything not only from an accessibility standpoint to make our products and our tools as accessible as possible, but really trying to learn on how we can make our content more inclusive and diverse and accessible as well. So those are top priorities for our company.
Awesome. Karen asks an important question. You know, sometimes we work in companies where the leadership is not bought in, right? And so how do you convince senior leaders to make that shift? How do you convince them? I think there's two pieces. There's convincing them that it's important, and maybe three. Convincing them that it's important, showing them how, and then holding them accountable, right? And it's all three of those things together. So how do you do that? How do you get people at the leadership level to see that, to make the change?
So, okay. So I can start here. So I've had the pleasure and displeasure working with some great leaders who get it and working with some that are definitely never going to. And I think you're right, Melinda, it is all of those things. And when you start with the awareness piece, sometimes it's having really difficult conversations. I find on the personal level is better than just having kind of the big management meetings and leadership meetings and having conversations there. It's really getting into helping them understand the privilege that they have for being in the position that they're in, the opportunities that they are either creating or stopping people from having, in what their workforce needs to look like, because the more diverse and inclusive your workforce is, the longer people stay, the more innovative you are. You know, there are some leaders that are definitely more on the cerebral side, and so the facts and figures speak to them. If you start talking about bottom line and all of that kind of good stuff, but also if you really want to look at a behavior change, it's really getting into not just the mind, but the heart. And so I found that kind of one-on-one conversations with leaders to really unpack the stuff, and those can be uncomfortable conversations because we could be talking about things like privilege and fragility and, you know, maybe not purposefully stopping people from coming into the space, but by some of their actions, showing them what some of those results could be. And if you get a leader who really cares about their company, cares about doing the right thing, they at least listen. And then it is kind of just unraveling from there. What are the actions we need to take? What can you do to, again, be accountable to your company, to your function, to your organization? And not just by words, because we all know that words sound pretty, but it's the action that matters. And it could start small. Small things can actually make a really big difference and get them on their way to systemic change. It normally doesn't happen overnight, but some of the awareness could. Right? So it's understanding where the leaders are, helping them get to the place where they need to. And sometimes that's emotionally laborious work. No, it is emotionally laborious work. but you know, being in the space that we're in, that's our job, that's our passion, that's our career. So it starts there. Again, like we can have the best grassroots ever and the best employees doing all the wonderful work. But if it doesn't also start at the top, that's where you start to have issues with things being successful. So I think it's just really getting in there with the C-suite, with the executive team, and starting to break down years of ways of thinking and years of taking action.
And I'd like to follow up on LaFawn. I think one of the areas that I have to say, I'm not a D&I professional, but I do work in the world of marketing and comms as well. And what I've seen that has been incredibly powerful of force are frankly investors and shareholders. And when analysts ask about ESG on investor calls and ask about that changes the entire C-suite's perspective on, oh, this is important for our the biggest boss, the shareholders. And so I think that's changed a lot of the tenor of conversation. And frankly, my experience is that communications teams have conveyed how important that is from both investor relations side and then also from the external relations side. And then the HR team has to really the people team has to really take that and also demonstrate how it impacts recruitment and retention. But I just want to throw that out because I've certainly seen that when investors and the shareholders raise it, ears and eyes all pay attention.
Yeah, I think it's also important, data really does matter. And for many, many years working in accessibility, company didn't even care about accessibility, much less implemented anything like that in their design or or in their marketing or any of that. But when you start looking at the numbers, you have 1 billion people in the world with a disability. But when you look at like the caregivers, the friends and family, the people who may not self-identify, that number is closer to 7.7 billion people. So when you think about who you're excluding, that really gets their attention. But then also there's power in storytelling. There's power in showing the impact that you're having on someone's life, many people's lives, when you do make things accessible, when you do include people, and when you have leadership who really does care about people and making sure that people have access to critical information or that they see themselves, that really does have an impact and start to create some change. But again, sometimes it's like little wins that matter, and then just continuing to show those wins and showing what happens and the impact when you do include and when you are thoughtful about how people, especially with disabilities, are often left behind. When you do include them, what does that look like? And I've seen that continue to be successful over many, many years of many advocates pushing for that access. So I do believe that data and storytelling and personal stories of how we're helping people does make a big, big difference. You just have to continue to talk about that and share that and escalate it all the way up until, you know, somebody hears you and opens that door and makes it a priority.
This question, I think maybe KR, you might be the best person to answer. So people with disabilities have really high unemployment and underemployment rates for people with disabilities. It's already difficult, and then you add COVID-19 on top of this. What is your advice? Do you have some advice for people with disabilities who are trying to find job opportunities right now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's important, one, that I see opportunity. But for many, many years, people with disabilities wanted the opportunity to be able to work remotely or work from home. And now that that's been proven that that's possible and we can be productive, and I hope that that will allow companies to give more opportunity to people with disabilities who may not have been able to leave their home or being able to get from place to place, for example, or have the tools to do their job remotely. Now there's this thinking that's possible, right? So it's really looking at what the opportunity is now and what COVID has shown us with remote work to open the door for more people with disabilities. So we still have work to do to make sure that we're building accessible tools, that we're making things accessible to people so that they can do their jobs. But I think the first step now is that we can work remotely, and giving that opportunity, I'm hoping to see more flexibility in people around the world who have disabilities to be able to work. And so I see promise in that. So if anything, it's shown that what we've been asking for all along may be a part of, you know, the opportunity for our community to gain more work, because now that remote work will be more the norm.
Awesome. And LaFawn and Annabelle, if you have anything to add, just jump in too.
We can't beat that.
Okay. Nobody can beat KR. She's amazing. Awesome. So the title of this webinar was around belonging, and we haven't totally defined that, I don't think. You said a few words about it early on, LaFawn, but so how do we, what does the belonging feel like? How do we know that we've got to that place where everybody feels like they belong? What is that feeling? What is that space that we want to create?
So I think, honestly, belonging is an outcome of diversity and inclusion. I kind of do like a D plus I equals B. And I think when employees feel psychologically safe, I think that's a huge component of belonging. When they feel valued, when they feel trusted, when they feel like their voice is heard, and they feel connected, right? That's whether it's to their fellow employees or to the mission of the company or to being able to grow in their career, but there needs to be a feeling of connectedness there. And I think there's a few ways to measure those, you know, sentiment analysis and all of that, but also looking at your retention rate. Are people staying longer? Are they really growing their career throughout your company? Do they feel like they have the space to be themselves? And You know, I for years used to say, bring your whole self to work. And now I'm saying that's a lie. Don't bring your whole self, bring your best self, because y'all don't want to see all of this. So I think it's in that space when people can feel connected, people can feel like they can be themselves and they can grow, that is what belonging feels like. It is a feeling though, right?
And I would agree with LaFawn. You know, it's interesting. I was just reflecting back on my aha moment. And what's been so interesting is when I joined Alaska, I realized that we actually take all of our employee resource groups to Capitol Hill with our CEO or president to have them go lobby and learn to lobby and walk the halls and meet congressional members. And that to me is, you know, that like just gives me like warm and fuzzies, because to me, that is actually teaching people that they belong in the corridors of power. And that I think is like, to me, belonging is that you know, I don't know how the future workplace will look like, but that the corner office or the hall, you know, these where the boardrooms, that you feel perfectly comfortable in that place, and that it doesn't feel like you're out of place in any way, that you don't have to put, you know, the imposter syndrome to be successful. And I also wanted to share that Alaska Airlines launched our belong initiative this year. So I'm rocking our t-shirt. But that's kind of my feeling, is that it is a sense of comfort, and that it is a sense of safety as well.
Kiara, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, LaFawn and she's so right. I totally agree with her.
Awesome. Yeah, and I will say that LaFawn, when you were describing that, like your whole energy changed, and I think the energy in this virtual room changed as well. So it's definitely a space I think we all want to be in and work toward being in. And my last question is a very quick one, because we only have a couple minutes. Is so as you mentioned, LaFawn, this work can be really difficult, toxic. You know, we're working on deep-seated issues that are hard to change, and minds that are hard to change, and hearts that are hard to change. How do you take care of yourself? What do you do to really regenerate and be able to bring that out? I mean, I will say I do a lot of meditation and yoga, and also motorcycle riding to get out into nature and just be in this beautiful California space we are landed in. And what do you all do? How do you regenerate?
I'll start with that. I have to say I'm very grateful to my wife. She makes sure I work out every day. She's a former professional athlete herself. She swam for China, so fitness is very important to her. So if I didn't have her like bugging me every day, make sure I work out and leave my desk for 30 minutes. Puppies are amazing. I have a great puppy who is always happy to see me every day. So having that has really been a blessing. But really, my community keeps me motivated. They really need us right now. All of us are doing incredible work, and I think they inspire me more than anything to keep moving things forward, because we have to keep moving forward. So that gets me motivated every single day when I'm able to help get my community voices out there and make sure that things are moving in the right direction.
And I'll chime in. I do not work out like KR does. I wish I did, but I do meditate as well, and I listen to positive meditations to keep me motivated. And then the second thing that I do is I actually journal, and I've kept a journal for most of my adult life, and it's a good place for me to reflect, kind of process the things that are happening in the day.
So it's a heavy question, Melinda. And one that I'm having a lot, especially with folks that do this work. Oftentimes when you do this kind of work, you give a lot of yourself, of your energy, of your passion, all the things, and you tend to hold a lot of it too for others. So whether that's for your own community or whether that's for other communities, you tend to hold it. And so I will find myself, like a colleague might go, "Are you okay?" Because my eyes look weird or I just look drained and all of that. And so I have to make a special effort to take care of myself. And when I do get drained, to figure out what is it that's going to fill me up. KR, like you, if it wasn't my fiance and her just being like, "Let's go outside, let's take a walk, let's work out." I'm like, okay, let's eat better. Being able to step away from your just work and disconnect and breathe and go into nature and all of those things. But whatever it is, I wish I could ride it. She won't let me have a motorcycle, Melinda. But whatever it is that allows you to recharge, those are the things that you have to do, especially right now. I am often saying we are living in active trauma. All of us are, right? None of us are working from home. We're working at home during a global pandemic. And so because of that, we have to take care of ourselves even more than we may have done before.
Totally agree. Well, thank you all. And I'm going to turn it over to Denise. I appreciate you all. And thank you for all of your great comments. Sorry, we didn't get to all of the questions. But I'm sure that if you tweet at us, we'll answer them if you still have those questions that aren't answered. And please do take care of yourself in this time, because it is not an easy time.
Thank you so much, Melinda, for the excellent job moderating this discussion. And thank you to our wonderful speakers, KR, Annabelle, LaFawn. You guys are exceptional, and we are so grateful for the wonderful work that all of you are doing. So thank you so much. And we certainly encourage all of our participants here today to all take action in any way that you can within your own company and communities as well. So, and thank you for joining us. And we hope that you all stay healthy and safe and enjoy, hopefully, a wonderful 3-day weekend. So thank you. Bye.